The rain came down in sheets that blurred the mansion's security lights into halos. Adrian Cole slammed his car door and strode through the downpour, the hiss of tires on the wet driveway fading behind him. He had just returned from a meeting in Ikoyi. Contracts, deadlines, and egos still ringing in his head, when a strange sight stopped him cold. Under the garden almond tree, a slim figure sat, hunched on a low stool, clutching a small lunch bowl. Water dripped from her hair onto the soaked rice inside. "Nana!" he barked, disbelief slicing through the thunder. "What are you doing out here?" She flinched, almost spilling the bowl, her soaked uniform plastered to her body like second skin. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, standing too quickly. "I didn't want to dirty the kitchen floor." Madame Maid said, "Enough." Adrian's tone cut like a whip. He stared at her trembling hands, the thin fingers gripping plastic as if holding dignity itself. Behind him, the mansion glowed warm and golden through the rain, his world of order, while she stood outside it, shivering in silence. "Get inside before you fall sick," he said sharply, yet she didn't move. "I was told I can't," she whispered. Thunder cracked over Banana Island. Madame Sade Bakare appeared at the doorway, umbrella poised like a crown. Her voice, calm and oily, floated above the rain. "She shouldn't be near the main hall, sir. She broke one of the crystal decanters this afternoon. Your father's." Adrian turned, rain streaming down his face. "What?" "It shattered beside her mop bucket," Said said smoothly. "She begged me not to tell you." Nena's eyes widened. "No, sir." "That's not true." "Quiet," Adrian snapped, his patience snapping with the lightning. That decanter was priceless, part of his late father's collection. "You broke it after I warned everyone about that display?" "I didn't, sir," her voice cracked, pleading through the storm. "I was cleaning the tiles when—" Her foot slipped on the drenched pavement, sending her lunch scattering into the mud. The plastic bowl split, rice mixing with rainwater. She landed on her knees, palms scraping the gravel. Adrian's jaw tightened. He felt something twist in his chest, annoyance, maybe guilt, but he crushed it down. "Pick that up," he said. "We'll talk tomorrow." Said nodded with serene obedience. "Yes, sir. I'll see to it." An hour earlier, before the sky broke open, the decanter had still gleamed on its glass shelf. Nana had been polishing the floor when Said entered, her perfume sharp as accusation. "You missed a corner," she said coolly, tapping her heel against the tile. "Yes, ma," Nana murmured, stooping to wipe again. She didn't see Sada's elbow brush the glass cabinet until she heard the crash, crystal exploding against marble. The older woman froze, eyes widening only for a second before narrowing with calculation. "Look what you've done," she whispered. Nena's breath caught. "Madam, it was—" "Enough," Sadie hissed. "No one saw it but us. You'll take the blame, or I'll tell Olga you've been sneaking extra food again. Do you want to go back to Arbor empty-handed?" Tears stung Nena's eyes. "Please, Ma, I swear I didn't—" "Then sit outside until I decide whether to forgive you." Her smile was faint, cruel. Better the rain than unemployment. And that was how Nena ended up beneath the tree when Adrian arrived home, a woman punished for silence. Inside, the billionaire poured himself whiskey to drown the noise of conscience. The living room hummed with generator power. Rain beat steady against the French windows. He loosened his tie, trying to shove the image of that shivering girl out of his head. He'd hired her through an agency 6 months ago, background check clean, recommendations glowing. He never learned more. People came and went in his house. He didn't have time to memorize faces. But something about her eyes under the stormlight, defiant and wounded at once, refused to fade. He walked to the window, watching the blur of grey outside. She was still there, small against the downpour. He muttered under his breath, "Foolish girl." Then came a knock. It was Mr. Bako, the old driver, cap in hand, uniform damp from the garage. "Sir," he said quietly, "forgive me for coming this late, but I think you should see something." He held up a small flash drive wrapped in cling film. Adrian frowned. "What's that?" "CCTV backup, Ogier. From the East Corridor. It shows who broke the glass." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Adrian stared at the man. "Are you certain?" Barco nodded. "Yes, sir. I install the camera myself. Madam Maid no. She knocked the shelf with her elbow, then pushed blame to that girl. I fit show you." For the first time that night, the billionaire felt his pulse slow, the arrogance draining into dread. He took the drive, its tiny weight suddenly immense. "Thank you, Barco," he said quietly. When the driver left, Adrian stood alone in the glow of the fireplace, the flash drive in his hand, the storm whispering outside like judgment. He replayed the memory, the girl's bleeding palm, her voice trembling in the rain, the obedience that masked quiet humiliation. He whispered, almost to himself, "What have I done?" Outside, the rain began to ease into a soft drizzle. Under the almond tree, Nena still sat, unaware that the truth now lived on a tiny silver chip inside her master's palm. Adrian sat at his mahogany desk, the flash drive glinting under the study lamp like a confession waiting to be heard. His laptop screen reflected his tense face as thunder rumbled over Lagos Lagoon. He hesitated before inserting the drive, not because he doubted Barco, but because he feared what he might find. The video opened with the East Corridor, time-stamped that afternoon. There was Madame Maid, moving briskly past the glass shelf, clipboard in hand. She turned sharply, her elbow striking the cabinet. The decanter wobbled, then shattered across the marble floor. Adrian leaned forward, breath tight. Seconds later, Nena entered the frame, confusion etched on her face. Maid's expression shifted instantly. Sweetness curdled into accusation. She pointed, gestured, then grabbed Nena's arm, pushing her toward the back door. The footage had no sound, but the truth was deafening. Adrian paused the video, his reflection trembling on the dark screen. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt something he couldn't buy, fix, or silence: shame. He sank back in his chair, hands covering his face. The hum of the generator filled the silence, steady and cruel. For years, he'd prided himself on precision. Every contract, every staff policy, every rule meant to keep chaos away. But somewhere in all that order, he had lost sight of people. Nena wasn't just a maid in uniform, she was a human being enduring storms he'd never even noticed. His late mother's voice echoed faintly in his head. "A rich man's wealth means nothing if his heart remains poor." He exhaled, shaky and long, then stood abruptly. He could no longer sit behind that desk while she sat outside, soaked and broken. Grabbing an umbrella, he strode through the hallway. Each echoing step felt heavier than the last. By the time he opened the back door, the drizzle had softened, the sky dimmed to silver. Under the almond tree, she was still there, unmoving, her frame trembling. He felt the weight of his own arrogance pressing down harder than the rain ever had. "Nena," he said softly this time, his voice stripped of authority. She startled, looking up with red, tired eyes. "Sir," she whispered, struggling to stand. He moved closer, opening the umbrella above her. "You're hurt." She glanced at her scraped palm. "It's nothing. Please, sir, I'll clean the floor again tomorrow. I promise." He shook his head. "You won't. I saw the footage." Her lips parted. "Footage?" "The corridor camera," he said quietly. "I know what happened." For a heartbeat, she couldn't speak, only tears mixed with the rain on her cheeks. "So you know I didn't—" "I know," he cut in, regret thick in his tone. "And I'm sorry." The words seemed to stun even him. He had apologized to board members, governors, business partners, but never like this. Madame Maid will not work here another day. Nena looked down, clutching the hem of her apron. "Thank you, sir." But he shook his head again. "Don't thank me. I should have believed you." They stood under the tree, the air heavy with unsaid things. "Why didn't you defend yourself?" he asked quietly. Her eyes met his, steady despite the tremble in her voice. "Because people like me don't win arguments in houses like this, sir. We just hope not to be thrown out." He had no answer. For years he'd let discipline replace empathy. Every rule had felt like control. Every silence had felt like peace. But now, in the quiet rain, it sounded like guilt. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It dwarfed her, but she clutched it tightly. "Come inside," he said gently. "We'll get you warm and treat your hand." She hesitated, still wary. "Are you sure?" "I am," he said, meeting her gaze. "And I intend to make things right." She followed him back toward the mansion, her bare feet leaving small prints in the wet earth, proof that she had been invisible once but not anymore. Inside, the warmth of the house seemed to swallow the storm's sound. Adrian led her to the kitchen, where he fetched a clean towel and a small first aid box. He hadn't done something this simple in years. "Sit," he said, voice gentle. She obeyed. He cleaned her palm carefully, his movements awkward but sincere. "You have a child, don't you?" he asked suddenly. Her head lifted in surprise. "Yes, sir. A boy. Tobe. He has asthma." "Bacco mentioned it," Adrian said, tying a small bandage around her hand. "How old?" "8. Does he go to school?" "Sometimes," she murmured, "when I can afford it." The words landed heavier than any storm. He straightened, silent for a while, then said quietly, "Tomorrow you'll have the day off, and from now on you'll eat inside, where it's dry." She looked at him as if unsure whether it was kindness or pity. He met her eyes. "It's respect," he said simply. Outside, the rain stopped completely, as if the sky had been waiting for those words. Morning came washed and quiet. The estate gleamed under early sunlight, puddles catching reflections of palm fronds and gold-painted walls. Nenna stood at the servants' quarters window, gazing toward the garden where last night's storm had raged. The almond tree still dripped water, its leaves heavy but alive. She held Adrian's jacket folded neatly in her hands, unsure if she should return it or burn it to forget the humiliation. But a soft knock broke her thought. It was Bacco holding a flask of tea. "Ogre say make you rest small," he said kindly. "He no go office today?" She blinked. "He didn't?" "No. Since morning he de inside study." Bacco smiled faintly. "Madam Sade don pack. Security follow go gate. That woman no even greet anybody." Relief flickered across Nenna's face, then confusion. Why is he doing all this? "Maybe he see wet-in money no fit by," Bacco said, eyes twinkling. Peace of mind. Inside the mansion, Adrian sat before his laptop, staring at the paused video of Sadie's betrayal. He deleted the file, emptying the recycle bin, as if erasing the evidence could erase the guilt. But guilt doesn't vanish. It only waits. He picked up his phone and called HR. "Yes," he said. Voice firm. "Terminate Sade Bakar's employment immediately and double-check the welfare records for all domestic staff, housing, health, everything." He hung up and leaned back, running a hand through his hair. His mother's portrait hung opposite him, her eyes kind, almost knowing. He'd inherited her business sense, but not her softness. Somewhere between boardrooms and headlines, he'd lost the ability to see people. Until last night. He thought of Nenna's trembling voice, her scraped hands, the quiet dignity that refused to shatter even when he yelled. The memory stung. For the first time in years, Adrian Cole felt small inside his own empire. By afternoon, the mansion was quieter than usual. Staff whispered about Madame Sade's firing, unsure what had changed. In the kitchen, Nenna sat on a stool sipping tea as the chef. A young man named Femi cleaned counters nearby. "He called her out himself," Femi whispered, "right there in the study. No shouting, just, 'You're done here.'" Nenna said nothing, staring into her cup. "You lucky-o," Femi added, grinning. "Some bosses go believe anything their housekeeper talk." She smiled faintly. "It's not luck," she said softly. "Maybe grace." When Adrian entered, conversation died instantly. "Carry on," he said, waving them off. He approached Nenna, hands in pockets. "You feeling better?" "Yes, sir." Thank you. Good, he nodded. I'd like you to come to the office later. There's something I want to discuss. Her brows knit. Sir. Nothing bad, he said quickly. Just something overdue. He turned and left, his footsteps measured but uncertain, like a man learning how to walk again. Late afternoon sunlight spilled through the wide windows of Adrian's study. Nenna stood near the door, uneasy but composed. Adrian gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Please, sit, she obeyed, folding her hands on her lap. I owe you an apology, he began. I judged without listening, acted without seeing. I let arrogance speak where compassion should have. Nenna looked down, unsure how to respond. You don't have to. I do, he interrupted. You're part of this household. You deserve the same respect as anyone else who works here. He slid an envelope across the table. That's your new contract. Salary increased, health insurance added, and your son's school fees covered through my foundation. She blinked rapidly, words catching in her throat. Sir, I can't accept. You can, he said, voice steady. Because this isn't charity, it's correction. She took the envelope slowly, tears burning behind her eyes. Thank you, she whispered, for believing me now. No, he said quietly, for making me believe in myself again. That evening the house felt different, lighter, alive. Nenna passed through the grand hallway, pausing before the framed portrait of Adrian's late mother. The woman's painted eyes seemed to watch her with quiet approval. She whispered under her breath, Thank you. Upstairs, Adrian stood on the balcony gazing down at the garden. The same almond tree that once hid injustice now glistened peacefully under the setting sun. For years he had measured success by numbers and headlines. Tonight, it was in silence. He saw Nenna step out into the courtyard, her posture no longer small but steady. She wasn't just his maid anymore, she was a mirror showing him the man he'd forgotten to be. As the evening breeze carried the scent of wet earth, Adrian murmured, The moment that awakened my heart. The city hummed beyond the gates, indifferent yet alive. Somewhere, a new story had begun, one born not from power, but from redemption. The next morning brought the scent of fresh rain and hibiscus flowers. Lagos had quieted after the storm, but inside the Cole mansion, something invisible had shifted. The staff spoke in lowered voices, still adjusting to the change in command. In the kitchen, Nenna wiped down the counters with quiet precision. Gone was the fear that once hovered over her shoulders, in its place lingered cautious relief. Femi the chef nudged her playfully. You sabi the ogre matter now? Man no sleep since last night. She smiled faintly. Maybe his conscience finally woke up. Before Femi could reply, Adrian appeared at the doorway wearing a simple white shirt instead of his usual tailored suit. Nenna, he said, his voice measured. Join me for breakfast, please. Femi's eyes widened as she froze mid-motion. Sir, she whispered. I insist. He gestured to the dining hall. It's time I stopped eating alone. The words, simple as they were, felt like history bending. She followed him to the long dining table, polished mahogany that could seat 20, but had only ever held one. Adrian sat at the head, motioning her to take the seat beside him. The moment felt awkward, reverent, unreal. Steam curled from the jollof rice and fried plantain before them, the smell of home and contrast. Eat, he said softly. She hesitated, glancing at him. Sir, I'm not. Please, he interrupted. You've worked here 6 months. I don't even know your favourite food. She gave a shy laugh. Eforiro, sir. Eforiro, he repeated, almost smiling. We'll have that tomorrow. Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but tender. For the first time, she wasn't invisible in that hall. When she finally ate, he watched quietly, not as an employer, but as a man unlearning distance. Outside, sunlight filtered through the tall windows, turning the marble floor gold. Somewhere in that stillness, something soft began to grow between them. Mutual recognition. Later that day, Nenna walked through the mansion corridors with a clipboard. Adrian's idea. "You'll help me review staff schedules," he had said. "Grace used to handle it. I'd rather trust the person who lives the reality, not the person who just manages it." She had wanted to refuse, afraid it was too much, but his tone had left no room for doubt. It was an offer of respect, not pity. As she took notes from the laundry and cleaning staff, people looked at her differently now. "Miss Nenna," they said, testing the new title with curiosity. It made her cheeks flush, but inside, something healed. By evening, she returned the completed report to Adrian's study. "You did all this in one day?" he asked, impressed. "I just listened," she said simply. "People talk when they feel safe." He nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. I've spent years building walls and calling them systems." She smiled faintly. "Even the strongest walls crack when hearts are ignored." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "And when they do, sometimes light gets in." That night, Nenna stood by the staff quarters window, phone pressed to her ear. "Toby," she whispered, her son's sleepy voice faint through the static. "Mommy's okay, my love. Guess what? I might get more work now and you'll go back to school." His small laugh was like rain on dry ground. "Can I have new shoes too?" "Yes," she said, tears pricking her eyes, "and new shoes." When the call ended, she exhaled, clutching the phone to her chest. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in years it didn't feel impossible. Across the compound, Adrian stood by his window too, staring into the garden where the storm had once raged. He couldn't explain why that moment, the image of her eating in the rain, haunted him. It wasn't pity, it was revelation. He had spent years building towers of glass, yet the only reflection that made him human again was a woman sitting quietly under an almond tree. Days passed, and the house settled into a new rhythm. Adrian spent more time at home, cancelling unnecessary meetings, delegating tasks he used to hoard. The staff noticed his small changes, the softer tone, the morning greetings. Barco called it miracle weather, but inside, Adrian wrestled with something he couldn't name. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was a longing to understand what he had missed all along. Late one night, he found himself in the kitchen again. Nenna was there folding napkins for breakfast service. "You should be asleep," he said quietly. She smiled. "Habit, sir. Quiet helps me think." "About what?" "About how peace can feel strange when you've lived too long without it." He leaned against the counter, watching her hands move with quiet grace. "You make this house feel alive again," he said. She looked up, startled. "It was always alive, sir. You just weren't listening." Her words landed like prayer, gentle but true, and he realized for the first time that awakening isn't noise. It's silence that finally speaks. It was Saturday morning when Adrian decided to visit Nenna's neighborhood. He hadn't planned it. His driver had been surprised when he said, "No office today. We're going to Surulere." The streets were alive with noise, hawkers shouting, buses honking, smoke rising from suya stands. It was a world Adrian had left behind years ago, traded for marble and quiet halls. Now he watched children run barefoot through puddles, their laughter unbothered by poverty. "Here, sir," Barco said, stopping in front of a modest compound painted in fading blue. Nenna's apartment sat near the back. He could hear faint singing, a woman's voice soft and sure. When she opened the door and saw him standing there, shock rippled across her face. "Sir, what are you doing here?" "Checking on a promise," he said simply, holding out a paper envelope. "Your son's school documents. He's officially enrolled for the term." Her lips trembled. "You came all this way. For that? For you both," he said. "And to understand the life I ignored." Inside her small apartment, time seemed to slow. The walls were neat but humble, plastic chairs, a radio humming faint gospel, Tobe's drawings pinned to a cracked wall. The boy peeked from behind the curtain, shy but curious. "Is this your boss?" he whispered. "Yes," Nenna said softly. Greet him. Good afternoon, sir. Adrian smiled faintly. Good afternoon, Toby. I hear you're smart. The boy grinned, his eyes bright. I want to be a doctor. Then you will be, Adrian said, and something in his tone made it sound like a contract. Nenna served him tea in a chipped cup, embarrassed. Sorry, sir, it's not much. It's perfect, he said, sipping it. He looked around the room, humble yet filled with warmth. You've built a home, he said quietly. Even with so little, it feels richer than my mansion. She laughed softly. Richness is not marble, sir. It's peace. The words lingered in the air like incense. For Adrian, they felt like scripture. When he returned to the mansion, the silence felt heavier than before. The luxury that once defined his success now felt hollow, sterile. He walked through the hallways, each echo of his footsteps reminding him of his old self, cold, efficient, detached. He stopped before the portrait of his father, a stern man in a dark suit, and whispered, Maybe wealth blinded us both. That evening, he called an all-staff meeting in the grand hallway. Everyone gathered nervously, unsure why. From today, he announced, every worker in this house will have health coverage and education support for their families. Gasps filled the room. This house will not run on fear anymore. It will run on fairness. Eyes widened. Carla the cook whispered, Na miracle be this. Nenna stood at the back, tears glistening. He looked at her briefly, no words needed. When the meeting ended, people clapped. Some even prayed aloud. In that applause, Adrian heard something he hadn't heard in years. Belonging. That night, Nenna wrote in her small notebook by candlelight. Sometimes storms don't come to destroy us. They come to wash the lies away. She paused, staring at the flame flickering beside her. The world was still unfair, she knew, but maybe light didn't have to come from the sky. Maybe it came from choices, one honest act at a time. Across the mansion, Adrian read through employee records, finding names and birthdays he had never bothered to learn. We have 43 staff, he murmured, and I only know 5. The shame didn't crush him anymore. It motivated him. He picked up his phone and texted Nenna. Thank you for the reminder that people matter more than possessions. When she read it, her chest tightened. She replied simply, Thank you for listening. Neither said more that night, yet both understood. Their storm had given them something rare. Clarity. The following week brought new routines. The staff began smiling more, whispering less. The garden bloomed again after the rains, and the mansion felt, finally, alive. Adrian invited Nenna to help redesign the East Wing office into a training room for domestic staff. You'll oversee it, he told her. You've earned that trust. She hesitated. Sir, I'm not educated enough for that. You're educated in life, he replied, and that's the kind that changes people. She looked at him then, her expression softening. You've changed too. Maybe, he said, or maybe I'm just seeing for the first time. As they walked through the hall discussing plans, the sunlight streamed through the tall windows, painting everything in gold. Outside, the same almond tree swayed gently in the breeze. It had once sheltered pain. Now it shaded rebirth. For the first time in a long time, both master and maid walked side by side, not as worlds apart, but as humans who had finally met. The following Monday, news of Adrian's reforms spread quietly across Lagos's elite circles. Business partners called, some congratulating, others mocking. Adrian, you're running a charity, not a mansion, one said over the phone. He only smiled. Maybe that's why it finally feels like home. That afternoon, he found Nenna in the garden, inspecting the newly planted flowers with Bako. They're looking good, Adrian said, hands in pockets. Nenna chose the colours, Bako replied proudly. Saina rebirth, she call am. Adrian chuckled. Fitting. When Bako left, Adrian turned to her. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "Not just with your work, but your presence." She looked up, surprised. "I didn't do anything special, sir." "You did," he said. "You reminded me that humanity is not weakness." For a moment, silence settled between them, comfortable and charged. Then she smiled faintly. "And you reminded me that power doesn't always have to hurt." That evening, as dusk fell over the estate, Nenna found herself sitting under the almond tree again, not in fear this time, but in reflection. The same branches that had once dripped sorrow now glowed under the orange sunset. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. For storms that reveal truth. Footsteps approached. She didn't need to look to know who it was. "Still your favourite spot?" Adrian asked. She smiled. "It used to be where I hid. Now it's where I breathe." He nodded, sitting beside her on the stone bench. "Funny," he said softly. "I used to think the world belonged to those who shouted the loudest, but you've taught me it belongs to those who stay true, even when silent." She looked at him, searching his face. "What made you come that night?" "Guilt at first," he admitted, "but now I think it was something else. Grace." The word lingered between them, delicate as light. At dinner, the staff gathered together for the first shared meal in years. Adrian sat among them, laughing quietly at Barco's stories about his old taxi days. Femi cracked jokes about his five-star Jollof, and the maids teased him back. Nenna watched it all with quiet joy. For once, the mansion wasn't divided by hierarchy. It pulsed like a single heartbeat. Adrian raised a glass of juice and said, "To the people who make this house a home." Cheers echoed through the hall, followed by a prayer from Barco. "May this peace never turn to pride again." Adrian's eyes met Nenna's across the table. In that look there was no status, no guilt, only gratitude. Later that night, when everyone had gone, he stood in the empty hall listening to the lingering echoes of laughter. For years he'd built walls to keep others out. Tonight, those walls finally felt like windows. The next morning, Nenna arrived early to the office Adrian had given her in the East Wing. The room was still being arranged, files stacked neatly, a small desk overlooking the garden. On the wall hung a framed inscription she hadn't seen before. "For the ones who serve in silence, may they be heard." Her eyes filled. She traced the words with her fingertips, whispering, "He remembered." Just then, Adrian entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning," he said. "You like the plaque?" "It's beautiful," she replied softly. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said. "It's part of the new foundation. We're calling it the Almond Trust, support for domestic workers and single parents." She looked up sharply. "You mean this isn't just for the staff?" "No," he said. "It's for everyone who ever ate in the rain while the world stayed dry." Her throat tightened. "You turned my pain into purpose." "You turned my wealth into meaning," he replied. By evening, the first application letters had already begun arriving. The Almond Trust became more than an idea. It became a movement. Former staff of other estates sent messages, thanking Adrian Cole for what they called the storm that changed everything. And Nenna managed the records herself, sorting through names and stories of people who'd been unseen too long. She often paused, tears in her eyes, realizing how far she'd come from that rainy night. Outside, under the same tree, a small plaque now stood. "Here, humanity was found." Adrian passed by often, sometimes just to look, sometimes to breathe. He knew that no amount of money could ever erase who he'd been, but perhaps it could honor who he was becoming. And somewhere in that truth, both of them had found freedom. The rain had once exposed their brokenness. Now it whispered of renewal. For both the billionaire and the maid, it had truly awakened their hearts. The Monday newspapers hit Lagos streets before dawn. By midday, whispers had begun to ripple through the upper circles of Ikoyi and Banana Island. "Have you heard? Adrian Cole, the billionaire, hired his maid as an advisor." The tabloids ran photos of Nenna standing beside him during a charity briefing, headlines bold and unforgiving. Billionaire's heart or scandal. Adrian's assistant called him in panic, but he only said, "Let them write. The truth will outlive their noise." In the mansion, the staff buzzed nervously. Nenna kept to her office sorting paperwork for the Almond Trust, pretending not to notice the tension. But by afternoon, she found herself staring out the window, her stomach tight. She'd never been in newspapers before, and now her name was everywhere, twisted, questioned. When Adrian knocked on her door, she turned quickly, eyes guarded. "Sir." "Maybe we should step back for a while," she said softly. He shook his head. "If we step back now, they win." That evening the rain returned, soft but steady, as if the city itself remembered their beginning. Adrian poured coffee and handed her a cup. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to spend millions to manage my reputation. Funny how now I'd spend anything just to keep the truth simple." She smiled faintly. "The truth is never simple when rich people are involved." He chuckled under his breath. "You're not wrong." For a while they sat in silence, listening to the rain against the glass. "It's strange," Nenna murmured, "how people love to see you fall once they've decided you don't belong." Adrian leaned back, studying her face. "And you?" "I stopped needing to belong," she said. "Now I just need to matter." The words landed deep, steady. He nodded slowly. "Then we'll matter together." She met his eyes, seeing not power now, but partnership. Outside, the thunder rolled faintly, not threatening this time, but protective, like memory remade into strength. The next morning, the mansion became a hive of activity. Cameras lined the gates, journalists shouting questions as the guards struggled to contain them. "Is it true she's living with you, Mr. Cole?" "Did you promote her for personal reasons?" The words stung like mosquitoes. Inside, Adrian paced his office, jaw tight. "They're not after truth," he muttered. "They're after spectacle." Nenna stood by the door, calm despite the noise. "Then don't give them one," she said. "Let actions speak louder." He paused, considering her. "You really believe that'll be enough?" "It was enough to change this house," she replied. "Maybe it's enough to change how they see it." That afternoon, Adrian called a press conference, not to defend himself, but to announce scholarships for 50 domestic workers' children, all funded through the Almond Trust. The story began to turn. By evening, social media flooded with praise. Maybe humanity isn't weakness after all. For the first time, the noise began to sound like applause, but not everyone celebrated. Among the elite, dinner parties crackled with resentment. "He's lowering the class standard," someone scoffed at a Victoria Island soiree. "Next, they'll say drivers deserve board seats." The laughter was sharp, wine-stained. Meanwhile, Nenna walked home that night with Bacco escorting her through the drizzle. "They go always talk," he said. "But truth no fear microphone." She smiled, grateful for his wisdom. "You think he'll stand firm?" "That man dey stubborn," Bacco grinned. "But this time, stubborn for good." Back at the mansion, Adrian sat alone on his balcony, the city lights shimmering below. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Pull back, Cole," the message read. "You're making enemies you can't afford." He stared at the screen, then deleted it. He had made peace with losing deals. What he wouldn't lose again was himself. Somewhere in the distance, lightning flashed, but this time, he didn't flinch. The following day, Adrian called Nenna into the library. "You once told me silence can break people," he said. "Now I need your voice." "Mine?" she asked, startled. "You'll give the opening speech at tomorrow's foundation gala." She froze. "Sir, I can't." "You can," he interrupted gently, "because you've lived what we're fighting for." That night, Nenna barely slept. Words tangled in her mind, fear knotting her chest. She'd faced storms before, but never a crowd. At dawn, she stood before the mirror, whispering her son's name like prayer. "Toby, for you." Meanwhile, Adrian prepared his speech too, but with a calmer spirit. He didn't want to impress anymore, he wanted to inspire. As dawn spread over Lagos, both hearts beat with the same rhythm, the rhythm of truth learning to stand without apology. The gala took place at Eco Hotel, the ballroom glittering with chandeliers and polished smiles. Cameras flashed as dignitaries filled the hall. Nenena stood backstage, hands trembling around her cue cards. She could hear Adrian's introduction echo through the speakers. The Almond Trust was born not from pity but from awakening, and tonight you'll hear from the person who awakened it. Applause rippled as she stepped forward, light flooding her face. For a heartbeat, her breath caught. But then she saw him, Adrian, standing at the edge of the stage, nodding once. Her voice came steady. "Good evening. I was once invisible. I worked in this city's grand houses, scrubbing floors no one looked at, cleaning messes no one remembered. But one night, in the rain, truth was seen." The hall fell silent. We don't need sympathy. We need fairness. We don't need pity. We need opportunity. The Almond Trust exists, so no one eats in the rain again. When she finished, there wasn't applause. There was standing thunder. The speech trended overnight. Hashtags flooded X and Instagram. No more rain. The Almond Trust. Awakened hearts. For once, social media wasn't tearing someone down. It was lifting something real. Adrian watched the feeds quietly from his office, his face unreadable, but his eyes alive. He had built skyscrapers and tech empires, yet nothing he'd ever done had reached people like this. In the staff quarters, Nena sat with Bako and Femi, watching clips of her own speech replayed on TV. "You see yourself now?" Femi laughed. "Na global star you be." She blushed, covering her face. "I beg, leave me jaw." But when she was alone later, scrolling through the comments, one message stopped her heart. "I watched this with my son. He said he wants to be like the woman who stood in the light." She covered her mouth, tears slipping free. For the first time, the world had not only heard her voice, it had echoed it. By midweek, the Almond Trust's donations tripled. Journalists who once mocked now requested interviews. But with the praise came pressure. "We need to scale fast," Adrian's advisors urged. "Corporate sponsors want control." He frowned. Control was the problem to begin with. Nena listened quietly, then said, "Sir, maybe they don't need control. They just need to be included." He turned to her, realizing how natural leadership sounded in her voice now. "Then you lead that discussion," he said. She blinked. "Me? Yes, you're co-director now. Officially." He slid a folder across the table, her name printed neatly beside his. "I thought the Almond Trust was about fairness," he said. "It's time we practiced it." She stared at the paper, heart thudding. "People will talk again." "Let them," he replied. "We don't build change by waiting for permission." She looked up and smiled, not shyly, but with the quiet certainty of someone who had found her purpose. That evening, Adrian drove himself for the first time in years. He parked near the Third Mainland Bridge, stepping out to watch the lagoon shimmer under the twilight. The wind carried faint music from a passing boat. He thought about his father's lessons. Never show weakness. Never mix business with emotion. For years he'd followed that creed, becoming a man made of steel and distance. But tonight he felt stronger for having broken it. His phone buzzed. A message from Nena. "Board call tomorrow at 10. Bring your humanity." He laughed aloud, shaking his head. Somewhere between scolding her and admiring her courage, he realized something deeper. She was no longer his employee. She was his equal in purpose. And for the first time, equality didn't feel like loss. It felt like balance. At the next board meeting, Adrian introduced Nena formally. "Some of you may question this appointment," he began. "That's fine. You questioned my humanity once too." A few executives shifted uncomfortably. "But the Almond Trust exists because she believed in fairness before I even understood it." He gestured toward her. This is Nena Okori, and she is why this company still has a soul. When she spoke, she didn't lecture. She told stories of domestic workers saving coins for children's books, of drivers walking miles to deliver medicine to their bosses' families. By the time she finished, the boardroom was silent. Adrian looked around. Still think compassion is bad business? No one answered. Outside, rain began again. Light, cleansing, alive. He smiled faintly. "Let it rain," he said. "We'll keep walking." Weeks later, the mansion had transformed into something almost unrecognizable. The hallways no longer echoed with silence but with laughter and footsteps. Nena's office buzzed with visitors, volunteers, reporters, former housemaids seeking help. She managed it all with grace, the rhythm of purpose guiding her. One afternoon, Adrian found her in the garden, sitting under the almond tree again, laptop balanced on her knees. "You've turned my home into an office," he teased. She smiled. "You turned your office into a home. Fair trade." He chuckled, settling beside her. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" "Sometimes," she said. "But quiet without peace is just loneliness." He looked at her, then nodded. "You always know how to name the things I avoid." "That's because I lived them," she said softly. A long silence followed, filled only by birdsong. For a moment, neither was boss nor employee, only two people connected by a storm that had saved them both. But storms test even the strongest peace. One morning, a legal letter arrived from a rival foundation, accusations of financial mismanagement, claiming the Almond Trust was a publicity stunt. Adrian's lawyer frowned. Baseless, but loud. They're trying to soil the movement. Nena read the letter, her hands trembling. "We've worked too hard for this," she whispered. Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll fight it, but not with anger, with truth." That afternoon, they held a public audit session streamed live. Every figure, every expense displayed openly. The transparency stunned critics into silence. When it ended, Adrian turned to her with a smile. "You see, sunlight kills rumor faster than lawyers." She laughed through tears. "You really have changed." "I had a good teacher," he replied. "One who ate in the rain and still believed in tomorrow." Outside, the sky cleared again, golden and forgiving. Later that week, Toby visited the mansion for the first time. His eyes widened at the marble floors and chandeliers. "Mommy, it's like a castle," he whispered. Nena smiled. "Not a castle, my love. A house that learned how to be kind." Adrian knelt to greet him. "So, you're the doctor in training?" "Yes, sir," the boy said proudly. Adrian handed him a small stethoscope from a gift bag. "Start practicing." Toby giggled, placing it against Adrian's chest. "Your heart is loud, sir." Adrian smiled. "That's a good sign." When the boy ran off to explore the garden, Nena turned to Adrian, her eyes soft. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said. "He reminds me what this is all for. For children. For hope," he said quietly. "For second chances." In that moment, something passed between them. Unspoken, undeniable. Not romance yet, but recognition of shared healing. That night, after everyone slept, Nena stood by the window of her office, watching the almond tree sway under moonlight. She thought about everything that had happened. The rain, the pain, the rebirth. The woman who once hid from storms now found beauty in them. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Grace is when life gives you the same scene twice, once to suffer, once to understand." Across the compound, Adrian sat in his study, scrolling through the first scholarship applications. One was from a girl named Ngozi, whose mother worked as a janitor at a local hospital. Her essay read, "I want to study law, so no one like my mother ever has to beg to be believed." Adrian leaned back, eyes wet. "We're changing something real," he whispered. And for once, the billionaire didn't sound proud. He sounded grateful. On Sunday morning, The mansion buzzed with preparations for the Trust's first anniversary dinner. The staff decorated the hall with white flowers and gold ribbons. Bucko hung lights along the driveway, whistling softly. "Who would have thought?" he said to Femi. "Rain bring blessing like this?" "Nah, true," Femi replied. Inside, Nena checked guest lists, while Adrian adjusted his tie by the mirror. When their eyes met across the room, the noise faded for a moment. "Ready?" he asked. "Always," she said. As guests arrived, laughter filled the air. Not the hollow kind of the rich, but the genuine warmth of change. And somewhere between speeches, lights, and gratitude, Adrian found himself glancing toward the garden. The rain had not come that night, but he could still feel it. That first downpour, that first awakening, forever written in their story. The anniversary dinner glowed like a Lagos dream. Cameras flashed, soft jazz hummed, and the banners of the Almond Trust shimmered under golden light. Nena stood near the entrance, welcoming guests with quiet grace. Adrian moved among governors and CEOs, his calm radiating confidence. Everything seemed perfect, until a journalist approached the podium uninvited. "Mr. Cole," she said loudly, microphone raised. "Is it true the Almond Trust's funds are linked to your offshore accounts?" The room froze. Murmurs rippled. Adrian's brow furrowed. "That's false." "Then how do you explain these documents?" she pressed, waving printed spreadsheets. He recognized them instantly. Internal drafts. Distorted. Someone had leaked private data. The applause of moments ago evaporated into tension. Nena's heartbeat pounded as security guided the journalist away. Adrian whispered to her, "Who had access to those files?" Her voice trembled. "Only staff and one board member." The betrayal hung like smoke. For the first time in months, the mansion's peace cracked. Later that night, Adrian gathered his core team in the study. "We audit everything tonight," he ordered, his voice cold again, almost frightening in its precision. Nena stood by, silent. "I trusted too easily," he muttered. "Someone wants to destroy what we built." "Sir," she said softly, "maybe they just want to see if you'll lose faith again." He looked at her, startled. "What do you mean?" "You changed because you trusted, not because you controlled. Don't let this storm turn you back." He stared at her a long moment, the rain starting outside again as if on cue. "You're right," he said finally. "I won't go back." By dawn, the audit revealed the traitor, a former associate, Mr. Okafor, jealous of Adrian's new reputation. He'd leaked drafts to tabloids, twisting numbers for revenge. Adrian sighed. "Press will eat this alive." "Then we'll feed them truth," Jenna said. And in that moment, he realized she had become more than his conscience. She was his compass. The next day, Adrian called a public press briefing. Cameras surrounded the mansion gates again, but this time he stood unflinching. "Transparency," he began, "is not weakness. It's accountability." He explained the leak, showing full bank statements and independent verification. The evidence cleared him completely. When reporters turned to Nena for comment, she said calmly, "Integrity doesn't mean perfection. It means honesty even when it costs you comfort." The simplicity of her words silenced the crowd. That night, hashtags returned. Faith restored. Almond truth. But inside, Adrian sat on his balcony, staring at the wet garden. "It never ends," he murmured. Nena approached quietly. "Storms don't end, sir. They just teach us which roofs can stand." He smiled faintly. "Then I hope ours never leaks again." "It won't," she said, "because this time it was built with people, not pride." He looked at her then, truly looked, and realized how much she'd changed him, and how much he never wanted to lose her. 2 weeks later, the Almond Trust hosted a new project launch, free housing for widowed mothers. Crowds filled the courtyard, cheering as Adrian and Nena cut the ribbon together. But among the crowd, Okafor watched, bitterness shadowing his eyes. He stepped forward, cameras rolling. You talk about honesty, he shouted, but you're hiding something. Tell them she's living here now. Gasps rippled. Nenena froze. Adrian met Okafor's gaze steadily. Yes, he said clearly, she lives here, in the same house where she once ate in the rain, because this house now belongs to every worker who deserves dignity. Applause erupted. Loud, defiant, cleansing. Okafor's expression faltered, defeated by truth spoken without shame. As reporters swarmed, Adrian leaned toward Nena. Sometimes, he whispered, light burns the liar before it warms the good. She smiled faintly, then let it burn. The crowd's cheers rose higher, thunder echoing above. The moment of humiliation had become a declaration of freedom. That night, Adrian found her under the almond tree again, lantern light flickering between them. Are you angry I confirmed it publicly? He asked. She shook her head. No, sir. You told truth before it became gossip. That's strength. He sighed, sitting beside her. You've taught me everything I thought I knew about power. She looked at him, eyes gentle. And you taught me that kindness isn't weakness. They sat in silence, the soft hum of crickets wrapping the night. Do you ever miss who you were before? He asked suddenly. No, she said quietly. She was surviving. This one is living. He nodded, eyes glistening. Then let's both keep living. Above them, the stars shimmered through branches washed clean by the rain, reminders of storms survived and skies reclaimed. The months that followed were the brightest the mansion had ever seen. The Almond Trust expanded nationwide, scholarships doubled, and the press called it the Rain Revolution. Yet success brought exhaustion. Adrian worked long nights again, chasing perfection. One evening, Nena entered his office and found him asleep at the desk, papers scattered. She placed a blanket over him and whispered, Don't lose yourself again, ogre. The next morning, he found her note beside the coffee mug. Rest is also part of doing good. He smiled. At noon, he called her to the balcony. I've been offered an international award in Geneva, he said. I want you to come. Me? She asked. You're the reason it exists. Her heart fluttered with disbelief. I've never even been on a plane. He laughed softly. Then we'll start with the sky. Geneva was colder than anything Nena had imagined. Snow dusted the rooftops, and the lake shimmered like glass. Standing before the international audience, Adrian delivered his speech. I once thought wealth meant walls, he said. Then I met someone who taught me that wealth is bridges. He gestured toward her. She is proof that dignity can change nations. The applause was thunderous. Nena's eyes filled as cameras flashed. Backstage, she turned to him. You didn't have to mention me. I did, he said softly, because your reign became my awakening. She smiled, wiping tears. Then promise me something, sir. Anything. Don't forget the people who still eat in the rain. He nodded. Never again. And for the first time, the billionaire and the maid stood side by side not as story and saviour, but as equals beneath one truth. Compassion travels farther than money ever could. When they returned to Lagos, banners lined the streets. Welcome home, almond hearts. But inside the mansion, the storm was waiting. A rumour spread online. Adrian Cole secretly engaged to his maid. The gossip sites exploded. They're twisting kindness again. Nena sighed. Adrian rubbed his temples. I don't care what they think, but I won't let it taint your name. That evening, he called a press release. No, we are not engaged. But yes, she is my partner. In purpose. Some mocked. Others applauded. Afterward, Nena found him in the corridor, his shoulders heavy. Sir, she said gently, you can't control how people see kindness. He looked up, weary. But I can protect it. Then protect it by living it, she said. The words steadied him more than any headline ever could. Weeks later, tragedy struck. A fire broke out in one of the Almond Trust's new shelters in Ibadan. 2 children were injured, one in critical condition. The media swarmed, crying negligence. Adrian rushed to the scene with Nenna beside him. The sight of charred walls and frightened faces gutted him. "We did everything right," he whispered. "Sometimes good isn't safe," she said quietly, "but it's still good." They spent the night organising medical care, covering all expenses and visiting every affected family. The injured child survived, thanks to emergency airlift funding Adrian approved on the spot. The next morning, reporters filmed him comforting the families, no cameras hidden. When one asked, "How do you stay calm under fire?" he replied, "Because I've stood in storms worse than this," and found my heart still beating. It became the quote of the year. Days later, back at the mansion, the weight finally broke through. Adrian sat alone under the almond tree, rain falling again. Nenna found him there, soaked, unguarded. "You'll catch cold," she said, holding an umbrella. He shook his head. "Let it rain. It's where it started, remember?" She knelt beside him. "Then let it remind you, storms don't erase what they water." He looked at her, the rain blurring his vision. "If I've done one thing right," he said hoarsely, "it was stopping that night to ask why you were out here." She smiled faintly. "Maybe it wasn't you stopping. Maybe it was grace stopping you." He reached out, hesitant, but sincere, and for the first time, their hands met not by accident, but by understanding. The storm no longer drowned them, it crowned them. The following months became a season of renewal. The Almond Trust rebuilt the damaged shelter bigger and better, naming it House of Grace. Adrian insisted the plaque bear both their names. "You deserve it more than I do," he said. "No," Nenna replied, smiling. "It took both storms to make one rainbow." International media returned, not for scandal this time, but for inspiration. Documentaries aired, calling her the woman who awakened a billionaire. When a reporter asked her what she wanted next, she answered simply, "A world where no one needs awakening to see humanity." The video went viral again, translated into 10 languages. Adrian watched it from his study, a quiet pride in his chest. He no longer saw an employee. He saw legacy in motion, carried by humility. One evening, as the city lights flickered, Adrian gathered the mansion staff in the Great Hall. "I built this place for success," he began, "but you all turned it into something better. Family." He handed out certificates of ownership, small housing shares for long-term staff. Gasps filled the air. Barco raised his hand, voice trembling. "Ogre, you sure you know they give too much?" Adrian smiled. "If I leave this world with empty pockets but full hearts around me, I gave just enough." Applause thundered through the hall. Nenna stood at the edge, watching him with quiet awe. Later, she found him alone by the window. "You've changed everything," she said. "No," he replied. "You changed everyone, including me." Outside, the rain began again, gentle this time as if blessing the promise he'd finally kept. Weeks later, the first Almond Trust School opened in Aja, a simple white building painted with murals of children reading under an almond tree. Adrian cut the ribbon, his voice steady. "This began because one night I saw a woman eating in the rain. I thought it was pity I felt, but it was awakening." He paused, looking toward Nenna in the crowd. "That night showed me what wealth really means, not what you own, but what you restore." The crowd applauded, many wiping tears. When the ceremony ended, children rushed forward to hug Nenna. One little girl said, "Auntie, you're the rain lady." She laughed, kneeling. "Yes, my dear, but this time, it's a good rain." That night, back at the mansion, Adrian and Nenna walked through the garden under soft drizzle. "Do you ever wonder," he asked, "why it had to be rain?" She smiled. "Because sun shows beauty, but rain reveals truth. You can fake the sunshine, sir, but never the storm." He nodded slowly. "Then I hope I never forget it." They stopped beneath the almond tree, the same spot where everything began. "When you first saw me here," she said, "you saw a mistake." "No," he said softly. "I saw myself. The part I'd buried under wealth." She reached out, taking his hand briefly. "Then maybe we both were saved by the same storm." Their hands lingered, not in romance, but in shared reverence for grace that had turned pain into purpose. Months later, as dry season arrived, the almond tree bloomed wider than ever. The plaque beneath it read, "Here, humanity awakened." Visitors from across Africa came to see it, leaving notes of gratitude. Adrian often watched from his balcony as Nena guided children through the garden, her laughter light as wind. He'd built empires, but this was eternity. One evening, as sunset burned orange over Lagos Lagoon, he whispered a final vow to the fading light. "Never again will anyone eat in the rain while I stand dry." Inside, the mansion lights glowed warm. The story that began with thunder ended in peace. Proof that storms, when met with courage, don't destroy people. They reveal their hearts. A year passed. The Almond Trust had grown beyond Lagos. Branches opened in Abuja, Port Harcourt, Accra, and Nairobi. Everywhere, its symbol, an almond tree under rain, became a sign of hope. But for Adrian, the truest reward was still the mansion itself. It no longer echoed with silence, it hummed with life. Staff held family picnics on weekends, children's laughter spilling across the garden. Nena managed everything with grace, now called Director Okorie by partners and press. Yet she remained the same, soft-spoken, humble, always first to arrive and last to leave. One afternoon, as she walked past the Great Hall, she saw Adrian kneeling beside a broken vase, sweeping the shards himself. "Sir," she gasped, "why are you doing that?" He looked up, smiling faintly. "Because I broke it." She shook her head, speechless. "You could have called someone." "I did once," he said, and she stood in the rain for it. The memory glowed between them, painful, beautiful, eternal. That evening, Adrian gathered the staff around the same spot in the garden where it had all begun. "A year ago," he said, "this house was only walls. Today, it's a heart." He gestured toward the almond tree. "It taught me something, that wealth measured in money dies when you do. But wealth measured in kindness outlives you." Nena stood beside him, her face illuminated by lantern light. "And storms," she added softly, "don't destroy homes, they reveal their foundations." Applause filled the garden, warm and unforced. For the first time in his life, Adrian didn't feel like a master addressing servants. He felt like a man speaking to family. When the gathering ended, Bako approached, his eyes moist. "Oga, that tree go carry your story long after we go?" Adrian chuckled. "Maybe it will carry yours too." The old man nodded. "Then we both live twice." As weeks passed, offers poured in. Government contracts, award invitations, global recognition. Adrian accepted only a few. He spent most days in the field visiting schools and shelters the Almond Trust had built. On one such trip to Kano, he and Nena visited a girls' school painted bright blue. The headmistress introduced a 12-year-old named Zara, who had written him a letter months earlier. "Sir," the girl said shyly, "I want to be an engineer because of you." Adrian smiled. "Because of me?" "Yes, because you listened to someone people didn't see." Her innocence cut through every accolade he'd ever received. As they left, Nena turned to him. "You realize what this means?" "What?" "You didn't just awaken a heart. You started a generation." He smiled faintly. "Then it was worth every storm." "Every one," she echoed. In her eyes, he saw something no award could give. Fulfillment. That night, they stayed at a modest lodge in the city. The rain came again, light and rhythmic. Adrian stood by the window, watching droplets trail down the glass. And Nena entered quietly, holding 2 cups of tea. "You still can't sleep in rain?" she teased gently. He smiled. No, but now it's a comfort. They sat together, sipping quietly. Do you ever wonder, she said, what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? He thought for a moment. Maybe I'd still be rich, he said softly, but poor where it mattered most. She nodded, her gaze distant. Sometimes God lets us see pain to remind us we're still alive. Then I owe him my life, he said, looking at her. She smiled, and for the first time, he realized the rain no longer sounded sad. It sounded like memory singing. Back in Lagos, the mansion hosted a symposium titled Humanity in Leadership. Business tycoons, politicians, and activists filled the hall. Adrian stood on stage beside Nenna as she opened the event. We've built towers that touch the sky, she said. But if they never touch lives, they're just monuments of emptiness. Her words drew applause. Adrian followed, speaking less like a billionaire and more like a man reborn. A leader's true measure, he said, is not the number of people beneath him, but the number he lifts beside him. When the event ended, international delegates approached them with admiration. Yet what mattered most came from a janitor cleaning the floor after the crowd left. He said quietly, Sir Ma, thank you for making people like us visible. They both smiled, humbled. That night, Adrian whispered to Nenna, that's the only award I'll ever need. Time passed, and change became routine. Toby grew fast, his asthma under control, his laughter bright. Adrian sponsored his education through high school, joking, Future doctor, don't forget to bill me for your first prescription. The boy adored him, calling him Uncle Adrian. For Nenna, life had finally found rhythm. Yet, beneath the calm, she sometimes feared the return of storms. Do you ever think peace can vanish? She asked one evening. Only if we stop watering it, Adrian replied. Peace is like this garden. Neglect it, and weeds grow. She smiled, letting the wisdom sink in. Over time, the Almond Trust became fully independent, run by a council of volunteers. Adrian stepped back gradually, preparing for something deeper, a legacy that didn't depend on him. I don't want statues, he told Nenna one day. I want systems that outlive my name. She nodded. Then we'll build them. The next year, Adrian announced a personal sabbatical. I want to understand the Nigeria I've only seen through tinted glass, he said at the farewell gathering. And I need to write, not for the press, but for my soul. Before he left, he gave Nenna a sealed envelope. Don't open it till I return, he said. It's not goodbye, it's gratitude. She watched as he drove away, his car disappearing beyond the gates, her heart caught between pride and longing. In the months that followed, she ran the Almond Trust alone. Her leadership was calm but firm, blending compassion with discipline, the very balance Adrian had taught her. When donors tried to sway decisions with money, she smiled politely and said, We take help, not control. Under her, the foundation thrived. The reign of judgment had long ended. Now came seasons of steady harvest. 6 months later, a brown envelope arrived at the mansion, postmarked from Kenya. Inside was a handwritten letter from Adrian. Nenna, I've found something you'd love. A small school by Lake Naivasha, run entirely by former maids. They reminded me of you. They don't call it charity, they call it dignity. I think that's what we built too. I'll be home soon. Attached was a photo, Adrian smiling among children, holding a chalkboard that read, We are seen. Nenna pressed the photo to her chest, tears warming her eyes. She whispered, You kept learning. That night, she visited the almond tree and placed the letter beneath the plaque. For the man who finally learned to see. The moonlight shimmered across the wet leaves as if blessing her words. When Adrian returned months later, the mansion erupted in celebration. Staff lined the driveway, singing. Nenna stood at the end holding flowers. Welcome home, sir. You kept it alive, he said softly. No, she smiled. It kept us alive. Over dinner, he handed her another envelope, the one from before. Inside was a legal document naming her as executive chairperson of the Almond Trust. She gasped. "Sir, I can't—" "You already have," he said. "It was always yours to lead." She stared at him, tears threatening. "You've given me everything." He shook his head. "No, you gave me back my humanity." That night, under the almond tree, she read the letter again and realized something beautiful. This story was no longer about her pain or his guilt. It was about grace finding its way home. Months rolled into another anniversary. The mansion hosted children, workers, and leaders for a final event Adrian called the Rain Banquet. As thunder rumbled softly in the distance, he took the stage. "Every great storm leaves a mark," he said, "but ours left roots. Roots of fairness, roots of hope." He turned to Nenna and smiled. "You were the rain that awakened my heart." The audience rose in applause. She joined him on stage and together they unveiled a new plaque. The Almond Legacy Fund for every worker forgotten by the world. Outside, light rain began to fall, soft and rhythmic. People didn't run for cover. They lifted their faces instead, letting the drops baptize the moment. For them, rain was no longer punishment. It was promise. Years later, Adrian Cole's mansion became the Almond Institute, a public center for ethics, leadership, and social reform. His health had begun to fail, but his spirit glowed undimmed. On quiet evenings, he sat beneath the almond tree writing in a leather journal. One day, Nenna joined him, older now but still graceful. "You never stop writing," she teased. He smiled faintly. "I'm finishing the story." "What story?" "Ours. The one that started in the rain." She laughed softly. "You already finished it, sir." "Maybe," he said, "but I want the last line to be hers." She tilted her head. "Whose?" "The woman who taught a billionaire how to feel again." Her eyes filled. "Then write this," she said quietly. "We were all blind until rain made us see." He nodded, pen trembling, and wrote it down. The wind rustled the tree above them, scattering blossoms like blessings. When Adrian passed away months later, the news filled headlines across Africa. Philanthropist Adrian Cole, founder of the Almond Trust, dies at 68. The mansion gates overflowed with flowers and prayers. At his memorial, Nenna stood before thousands. "He began as my employer," she said, voice steady. "Then he became my teacher, and finally my friend. His legacy isn't in his wealth. It's in every person who now stands under their own almond tree, unafraid of rain." Her words brought the crowd to tears. When the ceremony ended, she placed his journal beneath the tree, wrapped in cloth. "Rest now," she whispered. "You've done your part." The clouds broke open above, releasing a gentle drizzle, as if heaven itself joined in farewell. Years later, Tobe, now a young doctor, visited the institute to deliver a lecture titled Medicine of the Heart. He paused at the garden reading the plaque that bore his mother's and Adrian's names. "My mother taught the world that grace can bloom in storms," he said, "and Mr. Cole proved that redemption is possible, even for those who forgot how to feel." Students clapped softly, eyes glistening. He smiled and added, "Their story reminds us. Sometimes salvation doesn't come from temples or churches, but from simple acts done under rain." When he finished, a rainbow arched faintly across the sky. Somewhere Nenna watched from the balcony, whispering, "He kept the light." In her later years, Nenna continued to lead quietly, refusing interviews and fame. "The story is enough," she told anyone who asked. "Let it speak for itself." She spent her evenings tending the garden, guiding young volunteers, and reading Adrian's journal by lamplight. Inside its pages, he had written lessons he wanted the world to remember. Power without mercy is noise, wealth without purpose is dust, and love, when stripped of pride, becomes light. She smiled, closing the book gently. "You learned well, sir," she whispered. That night, As rain began once more, she sat beneath the almond tree, her heart full, her spirit quiet. When the Nenna passed peacefully years later, the sky wept the same gentle rain as before. At her burial under the almond tree, hundreds gathered, former maids, children, and leaders, each carrying a small bowl of rice. They poured it into the soil, symbolizing dignity restored. A pastor read Adrian's final line, "We were all blind until rain made us see." The crowd repeated it softly like a hymn. The rain fell harder, but no one moved. They stood smiling, drenched in light and memory. The tree swayed, petals fluttering down like tears, and thus ended their story, not of love and power, but of hearts awakened, forever proving that compassion, once kindled, can outlive both storm and time.